Hi, my name is Bud Kraus. I'm your friendly web design instructor, and this video is about how CSS works. What you're looking at is a visualization of the three style sheets, the browser style sheet, the user style sheet, and the designer style sheet, and how they blend together to form what it is that we see on web pages. The style sheets are nothing more than groups of rules pertaining to style. Style meaning things like the background color, the color of font, the font selection, topography, layout, all those matters that deal with presentation and appearance. Those are style properties, and those style properties or style rules are in all three style sheets. Now, the three style sheets are said to form a cascade. The cascade is the way in which those rules do blend, and the cascade is an algorithm built into every browser that decides which rules are honored, that is, those that you will see the effect of, and those rules that are discarded, that is, rules that are ignored. That's how the cascade works, and that's how style sheets work. So let's take a look at each of these style sheets, the browser first, and then we'll do the user style sheet and the designer style sheet. Let's first look at the browser style sheet. Some people call the browser style sheet the default style sheet, the initial style sheet, because without the browser style sheet, there wouldn't be a way of reliably designing our web pages. So what we're looking at here is one of the pages from the In My Garden project in the Intro to HTML class, which you may be familiar with, but if you're not, that's quite all right, because what I'm about to show you applies for every browser or in every web page. So here I'm using Firefox, and I'm going to go to View, and I'm going to go to Page Style. And I know this says no style, which is, I think, a bit of a misnomer because, well, here's no style. Now, yes, I know it doesn't look like much in the way of style, but to my way of thinking, yeah, it does have style, and the style that we're seeing here is being provided by the browser style sheet, and to a more limiting effect or a limited extent, the user style sheet. I'll get to the user style sheet in a little bit. I just want to focus on what is the default style sheet. For example, why is the heading tag bold? That's because the browser style sheet says heading tags are bold. Why is this paragraph text here of a normal font weight? That's because browser style sheet says the paragraphs are of a normal font weight. How about the fact that everything aligns to the left-hand side here? The browser style sheet says everything aligns to the left. How about the fact that there is space between this first paragraph over here and the second paragraph? Well, that space is called margin, and that's the distance is being set by the browser style sheet. How about if we scroll down a little bit here, we have an unordered list, and every list item has a marker, one of these little bullets. Well, what about the style of these markers? Here it's a little bit different. This nested list, how is this all being handled? It's all being taken care of by the browser style sheet. In fact, the browser style sheet is saying that there's margin space over here on the left-hand side. There's even more margin space here when there's a nested list. So everything that we're seeing here, with rare exception, is being set by the browser style sheet. Now I say rare exception because, as you're about to see in the user style sheet, there are some things here that are being set by the user style sheet. I'm just going to scroll down just a little more to see if there's anything else. Yes, for example, here's an ordered list, and you'll see that these markers are numbers, and it's the browser style sheet that's doing this for us. In fact, even this over here where we have a link, links are underlined. How do the links get to be underlined? The browser style sheet says underline the links. Now that's true in most cases. There is some exceptions to that as far as the underlining goes, but that's the way it goes. So the browser style sheet, again, is the default style sheet that every browser has to have, which is really great because as a designer, you may not want to style everything. For example, I personally like line height. That is the height between the lines of text. You can style that as a designer, but I like the browser to do that for me. So that's a little tour of the browser style sheet. And next, we're going to look at the user style sheet. Now let's look at the user style sheet. Now, I define the user style sheet as those things that the user can do to influence the way a web page looks. And that word influence is really important, and I chose it carefully because what makes this medium so different than any other is that users do have the ability to influence the way design looks. In traditional design, that's not possible. In web or electronic design, that's really possible. Now, that's not to say that users will actively engage and change the way web pages look. We know that, but they do have those options, and even if they don't exercise those options are present and they will influence the way the whole web page ultimately looks. So we can't factor those out. We can't ignore those as web designers. We have to be aware of those. And users' preferences or the user style sheet will change from browser to browser. Now I'm just going to examine Firefox, but if I were to look at other browsers, I would see that there are different options which deal with the way web pages look. So right over here, I'm going to go back to, or I'm going to go into where it says Preferences, and we'll see right over here I have it set already for content, so you can see the preferences over here. And notice fonts and colors. Now I'm not going to go through all the different options and the different choices, but just to give you a little flavor of what can be done, let's just look at colors. And I'm going to change this to this orangey red and see what happens over here. Look at that. The page color changed. That's kind of interesting. Let's change it back to white. And you can see that I can also change the text color. I'm not going to do that for our demonstration. But notice too that I can change the color of links, whether they're in the non-visited or visited states. And I'm just going to click OK over here. One other change I'm going to make to show us that things can change, such as font. If I chose a different font, such as, let's just go over here and pick this over here, you'll see right away how the styling changed over here. Well, now let me talk about two things that do influence the way web pages look. That is, what users can do to change the way a web page looks. One is definitely part of the user style sheet. The other is definitely not part of the user style sheet. Here I have reattached the designer style sheet. That is all the rules that the designer wrote to affect the way the page looks, and I'm going to get into that in a little bit. But for right now, the two things I'm referring to, one is the fact that the user can change, minimize, and maximize the viewport or the viewable surface area of the browser. So that's going to impact the way the user sees things, and it can impact the design to a great extent. Here it doesn't really impact so much the way the design looks, but in certain pages, the way they are built, it will definitely impact the way users get the information. So that's one way. That is the ability for the users to change the viewport of the browser. That's part of the user style sheet. What is not part of the user style sheet is the ability for the user to change screen resolutions. Screen resolutions are part of the operating system of the computer. Now, by screen resolution, I mean the number of pixels that go across, that would be the width, and up and down, that would be the height, inside not the browser viewport, but the entire screen. So in this case, I'm using a resolution that's 1,250 pixels across by 960 pixels high. I'm going to change that now to a higher resolution, and we're going to see what the impact of that is going to be on the design. Now, by changing to this higher resolution, you can see there's a whole lot more space here on the left side and the right side than what I had with a lower resolution. And there's also the page is longer and a little not as wide as before. So that's definitely going to impact the way pages look. That is the changing of the resolutions, but that is not part of the user style sheet. Remember, the user style sheet are those things that the user can do to influence the way a page looks within the browser itself. Resolution is not within the browser itself. Okay, on now to what is the designer style sheet. Well, at last I've come to the designer style sheet, and of course that's the third of the 3 style sheets that make up the Cascade in every single web browser or user agent. And here I'm going to talk about those things that the designer can do to set the style for a page and how it's done. So first thing I'm going to do is reattach my designer style sheet. So I'm going to go back over to View, and I'm going to go down to Page Style, and of course I'm going to reattach my designer style sheet, and let's see how that's done, or where the designer style sheet rules are written. So I'm going to show you the source code of this page, okay? And when I click on this link over here inside the source code, there's a CSS file over here. I'm going to click on that, and what you are looking at is the rules of the designer style sheet. I'm just going to take you through this real quickly because this is not the place to learn CSS, but you can see that there is a place where we can specify the rules that we want to apply for our pages, the design style rules. Anyway, right over here at the very top are some rules that commonly are used by many designers to affect their pages. It's called a browser reset. I'm going to sort of skip through that and show you the rules that I wrote specifically for this page. And here I set some of the font sizes for my various elements, so you can see right over here font sizes. And then I go ahead and style the body, that is the main page style, that is the background color of the page, the color of the font, and so forth, the font family that I've chosen. And then I went on to style the anchor and various elements as you go through this. There isn't any one particular order that these have to be in. That's one of the nice things about CSS, is what we call it loosely written. There's a wide variation in the way designers and developers write their style rules. But at the end of the day, you can see it's a separate file that people write this design specifications for their website. Okay, so that takes care of the designer style sheet, and hopefully you've gotten a good understanding here of how and where the 3 different style sheets are in any web browser.